There is a specific kind of silence that settles over a kitchen table when the checkbook doesn't balance, or when a government notice arrives with a header you don't immediately recognize. For millions of Americans over the age of 45, that silence is becoming a permanent resident. We were told that Social Security was the bedrock, the one unshakable promise in an ever-shifting economic landscape. But as we move through 2026, the ground is shifting beneath our feet. A series of regulatory adjustments, combined with the delayed effects of recent inflationary cycles, has introduced what many are calling the new rule of retirement reality. It isn't a single piece of legislation that changes everything overnight, but rather a structural pivot in how benefits are calculated, taxed, and distributed in an era of unprecedented fiscal pressure. If you are banking on the old math to fund your new life, you are operating on a map of a world that no longer exists. Understanding this shift requires us to look past the headlines and into the mechanics of how the system is currently being optimized for survival rather than for the comfort of the recipient. We are witnessing a quiet recalibration of expectations. Before we dive deep into the data and the specific structural changes affecting your monthly check, I'd like to invite you to join our community. If you value calm, data-driven analysis of the American economy without the noise of partisan politics, please consider subscribing. It is the best way to ensure you stay informed as these complex financial shifts continue to unfold. To grasp the magnitude of the change, we must first address the phantom of the cost of living adjustment, or COLA. For decades, this was seen as a shield against inflation. However, in 2026, the disconnect between the official Consumer Price Index and the actual expenses of a household headed by someone 60 or 70 years old has reached a breaking point. The goods that have seen the highest price stability are not the goods you are buying. Healthcare, specialized insurance, and property taxes in stable neighborhoods have decoupled from the standard basket of goods used to calculate your increases. This creates a net loss in purchasing power that compounds every single year. When the government adjusts the rule on how these benchmarks are weighted, they aren't just changing a number, they are fundamentally altering your lifestyle's expiration date. The middle class is currently caught in a pincer movement. On one side, we have the rising nominal value of assets like the family home, which increases tax burdens and disqualifies many from certain supplemental protections. On the other, we have a Social Security framework that is increasingly being viewed through the lens of means testing, even if they don't use that specific term yet. By adjusting the thresholds for how much of your benefit is subject to federal income tax, the government has effectively implemented a backdoor reduction in benefits for anyone who is disciplined enough to save in a 401k or IRA. You are, in essence, being penalized for the very stability you worked 30 years to build. It is a revelation that most ignore until they see the withholding on their first statement of the year. This structural shift represents a departure from the social insurance model toward a social safety net model. Insurance implies you get what you paid in. A safety net implies you only get what the system decides you need to survive. This distinction is vital. As the Social Security Trust Fund approaches its widely publicized exhaustion dates, the new rule is one of quiet attrition. It's the gradual raising of the full retirement age and the subtle tightening of disability eligibility. When you realize that the goal of the current administration of these funds is to preserve the system's solvency at the expense of the individual's projected wealth, the urgency of private tactical planning becomes clear. If you find this level of analysis helpful for your long-term planning, please hit the subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep digging into the documents that define your financial future. Furthermore, we must discuss the looming shadow of the housing market's impact on retirement. For the generation currently over 45, home equity was supposed to be the ultimate fallback, but in 2026, the cost of maintaining that equity Insurance premiums that have doubled in some states and the soaring cost of professional labor has turned many homes from assets into liabilities. When your Social Security check remains relatively flat, while your homeowner's insurance and utility costs climb at triple the rate of inflation, the check is no longer a tool for living. It is merely a subsidy for your overhead. This is the new financial pressure, being house rich and cash poor, while the primary source of your monthly liquidity is being eroded by fiscal policy. The psychological toll of this cannot be understated. There is a specific stress that comes from realizing the finish line has been moved just as you were preparing your final sprint. The American middle class has always been defined by a sense of trajectory, the idea that hard work leads to a period of earned rest. But the economic data suggests that for many, the new rule means the end of traditional retirement and the beginning of a semi-retired existence where the monthly check is a supplement to part-time labor rather than a replacement for it. This isn't just about money, it's about the erosion of the American promise of dignity in one's later years. As we look toward the remainder of the decade, the path forward requires a cold, hard look at your current allocations. Reliance on a single government stream is no longer a viable strategy for anyone wishing to maintain a middle-class standard of living. The math simply doesn't support it. We must look at alternative income streams, tax-advantaged withdrawals, and perhaps most importantly, a radical reassessment of what necessity looks like in a high-inflation, low-growth environment. The system is protecting itself, and you must do the same. In closing, it's important to remember that while the news is sobering, clarity is your greatest asset. Knowing that the rules have changed is the first step toward winning under the new conditions. The anxiety you feel is not a sign of personal failure, but a rational response to a systemic shift that is rarely discussed with this level of honesty. We are entering a period where the individual must be more informed, more agile, and more skeptical than ever before. If you want to stay ahead of these changes and protect what you've built, I invite you to subscribe and stay with us on this journey. The landscape is changing, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Look at your statements tonight, not with hope, but with the eyes of a strategist. The silence at the kitchen table is only scary if you don't have a plan to break it.